Thank you for joining today's webinar. Before we begin, I want to cover just a couple of logistical issues. If you come across any technical difficulties, please chat to the host. You can find the chat box on the right side of your screen. And if it does not appear, click the dialog bubble on the bottom right toolbar and it will pop up. During this webinar, you can chat comments or questions to our presenters and our panelists. We will hold questions until the end of the presentation. Thanks for joining us, and let's get started. On behalf of the Community Technical Assistance Center, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Transition Age Youth Engagement, Best Practices and Personal Experiences. My name is Jim Rodriguez. I'm the Director of Trauma-Informed Services at the McCall Institute for Poverty Policy and Research and the Community Technical Assistance Center. I'm going to be fielding the questions at the end, but for now, I'm going to pass things along to Sophia Duarte, who will be moderating the panel discussion.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I'm a graduate research intern working with Jim at the McCall Institute, Poverty Policy and Research, and as Jim said, I'll be moderating today's webinar. In today's webinar, we're going to be hearing the voices of people with firsthand knowledge of the experiences of transition-age youth and behavioral health. So this panel discussion will explore practices, engagement practices in particular, from perspectives of young people and parents who have navigated the transition-age years. We're very fortunate to have four wonderful presenters today. So we have Alexis Kennedy, a youth peer advocate who has herself utilized services in the past. Alexis's mother, Narda Kennedy, mother who has supported a transition-age youth as they receive services. Next, we have Stephen McCall, an adoptive and foster parent to young adults who are aging out of the foster care system. And lastly, we have Elijah, a statewide emerging leader for Families Together in New York State, who has also lived experience in healthcare services. Here you can see the addenda, a little bit about what we're going to do today. I'll get into an introduction, then we're going to spotlight some work that Amplify New York does, hear from our speakers, wrap up with engagement practices, also those in relation to COVID, and then take your questions and answers. So first, to just kind of set the frame, you know, what are we talking about when we talk about transition-age youth? And this introduction is just to introduce the topic before our incredible panelists share their personal experiences. So first, transition-age youth are generally young people between the age of around 16 and 25, but that age range can really range depending on what state and what area to find those parameters. And specifically, they're individuals who are just transitioning out of the child mental health care system and into the adult mental health care system as they've reached the age of consent. So there are a few different notable moments of transition. So just to keep in mind, there's pre-transition, when you're preparing to transition to adult mental health care, when you're in that in-between period, and then post as you're navigating getting into the adult mental health care system. Next, what is engagement? So research on transition-age youth note that engagement has not been consistently defined, specifically in research or practice. But today in this webinar, we're going to define it as the process through which young people actively participate in their treatment and services, and in particular, that happens in two distinct moments. So there's initial engagement with the youth, so that first contact or that early contact between the youth and healthcare provider, and next there is the ongoing engagement with care planning, right? So it's maintaining that ongoing collaborative relationship between the youth and the healthcare provider, and having the young person actively involved in that care planning. So we wanted to really highlight that there are these two different phases of engagement, initial and ongoing. And finally, we're going to hear several powerful stories from our panelists that are going to explore the following themes. So we're going to hear about navigating mental health care, finding the power of peer advocacy and being resilient, the importance of supporting parents and caregivers, and getting hope from the caregiver community, and then also providing parental and caregiver support, and empowering young people through collaborative relationships. That's really what we're going to be talking about today. So now that I've given some background context, I'm going to hand things over to Elijah, who is going to talk about his work with Amplify New York and also his experiences with transition-age youth.
Thanks, Sophia. Hello, everyone. My name is Elijah Fagan-Solis, as you heard, and I am the statewide emerging leadership statewide emerging leadership manager for Youth Power Families Together in New York State. For those of you that may not know, Youth Power is a New York State network hosted by Families Together in New York State that's run for and by youth and young adults. And what we do, we work to ensure that young people have a meaningful involvement on all levels of services that they receive. We ensure the availability of peer support through persistent advocacy, technical assistance, and by offering training and education opportunities. And one of those training and education opportunities that we offer is Amplify New York, which I do all day, every day, and I love it. So let me tell you a little bit about Amplify New York. This Amplify New York brings a twist on California model of youth leadership forum and has brought them to New York State. Can we go back just one slide? Thank you. And so bringing youth leadership forums here to New York State, we do that. We bring them regionally, which is a little bit different from other state models, as well as include families and caregivers in the process as well, which is really important. And that's gaining attention nationally as well. So Youth Leadership Forum is a 4-day, 3-night event that is absolutely free for young people. I can't stress that enough. And that includes different types of activities, hands-on activities, different panel presentations from peers, and of course, different opportunities to sharpen leadership and advocacy skills for young people between ages of 14 and 24. But also connected to the Youth Leadership Forum on the first and the last day is the portion for parents and caregivers known as Foundations for Leadership, where parents and caregivers have the opportunity to learn additional tools and strategies for supporting their young person with a disability in their care to continually set the stage for them to lead, to get involved in advocacy activities, and then transition into adulthood. Next slide, please. So some of the things that goes on at a youth leadership forum, we have different small and large group sessions that take place. We bring in different speakers. We always love to bring in different individuals who have disabilities so that young people with disabilities or cross systems experiences within the mental health system or what have you, juvenile justice, they have the opportunity to see other successful young adults that are leading successful lives. So we discuss different things such as disability history and culture. We have a wellness session as well that shows hands-on ways that young people can do very low-cost wellness activities to keep them, because self-care is so important, and we know that especially these days, being kind of in quarantine and kind of trapped in our homes. We bring in different independent living centers. We talk about financial literacy, a whole lot of different things. One of the really cool things that we do also is a personal leadership plan for every young person. So they get the opportunity to identify whether it's an advocacy goal, leadership goal, maybe it's a personal goal, and really break down a mountain of a goal into little steps so that they can be successful in reaching that goal. And we follow up with them throughout the year to make sure that they're taking appropriate strides for reaching those goals, make sure that they have the support and resources that they need specifically to that. And it's a really great program, but I only have so much time to talk about it. So one of the things that I really wanted to highlight was, I could talk about how great it is because I personally benefit from it as well, even as an older young adult nowadays. But I really wanted to highlight what did some of the youth learn at YLFs. And these are some real quotes from participants from last year's youth leadership forums. So one person from Long Island, I really love this quote, that they really thought that their disabilities, I was supposed to say could hurt me. They learned that their disabilities could help them rather than hold them back, and they really thought they would hold them back. And that's really powerful, because even myself as a young person, I really thought that as well when I was going through my transition into adulthood. Another person from Western New York found out that they were so powerful, and that's exactly the type of message that we at Youth Power, Families Together in New York State, and at the Amplify New York Leadership Forums really want to convey, that young people are so powerful, their voices matter, they have the ability to really affect different policies and laws, practices, regulations, all sorts of things, especially when they have the support of their parent and caregiver. Like we'll learn with Alexis and Narda in a little bit. They learn that it's important to advocate and empower others. And another individual, this is talk about transition age. They managed to get the courage to go back to college again. But the difference is that this time they could explain what they needed in regards to accommodations. They explained what to do if they have a seizure, and that was something that this young person was not able to participate in, had to drop out of school, and wasn't able to, really pursue their goals that they really wanted to. But through this initiative, they felt the courage and learned the different ways to advocate for themselves and to request reasonable accommodations. And kind of sharing about myself as a young person, growing up, I had a lot of healthcare issues, and a lot of what I did, I kind of figured out on my own. I didn't know about youth power. I didn't know about any sort of youth leadership forums or anything of that nature until I kind of got into my position at Youth Power Families Together in New York State as a mentoring coordinator. And I kind of mentioned already that even now at my age, I personally benefit quite a bit from participating and leading these events, because the level of peer support that is available is so important for these individuals that are participating in this, no matter if they're on the younger age or the older age of the 14 to 24. They all get to learn from each other. It's very supportive and powerful. And I encourage those of you who are listening, if you're really interested in maybe volunteering, we always could use some volunteers. We're looking for young people. You can see our 2020 dates and contact info on the right of that. Of course, due to COVID-19, these are kind of up in the air. We're still moving forward with our plans, hopefully, to kick off the year with a Disability Pride Parade in Western New York, but we'll see what happens. We are planning to perhaps go virtual if we need to, but share this information. Katie, I just saw something pop up. 14, the parameters. That's a really great question. Katie asked, how old do you have to be? The qualifications to attend as a young person, you have to be ages 14 to 24. You need to live in New York State, and you need to share about what some of your goals are in regards to wanting to become a leader, get involved in advocacy. And on the parents and caregiver side, your young person doesn't necessarily have to participate in the Youth Leadership Forum. If you're interested in just learning some additional skills, it's great if they do, because we want to serve the whole family, and we know that young people benefit best when their parents and caregivers are involved. But yeah.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a second to breathe, and yeah.
Yeah, Elijah, thank you so much. That was super thorough and helpful and insightful. And what Elijah really highlighted with what Amplify does, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is most successful engagement and engagement practices are those that engage the youth as a whole person and think about the other people and aspects of their life. And he talked really, really well and spoke about engaging families and caregivers and bringing in other people that could be role models for these youth. And that's something that we're going to hear as a theme throughout our stories, and I'll talk about a little bit more later, which is also supported by the literature. So yeah, now we are going to pass things over after we've heard from Elijah to Alexis Kennedy. She's going to be the first to share a more personal story about her experience navigating mental health care adversity and the power of being resilient in that. And in this, we'll hear a little bit about, what sort of is necessary and needed from a transition age youth perspective to be the most resilient that you can be. So, Alexis, if you want to take a few minutes and share, that'd be great.
So hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Kennedy. I am 20 years old, and I am currently working as a youth peer advocate in New York State. So to be a youth peer advocate, a big part of that is having lived experience as a young person within one of the child serving systems. So I myself have lived experience within the mental health system. I struggled from when I was about 13 up until probably I was about 19 is when I started to actually stabilize. So what I kind of want to make a couple points about today is about some barriers I experienced, a switch I kind of experienced to get better health, and then also some external factors that helped me during that time. So some barriers that I experienced during my mental health journey was kind of a cycle for me. So I struggle with mental health, which along with that came self-harm thoughts and suicidal thoughts. So when this would happen, I started a cycle of hospitalization. So it was kind of like I would do something that wasn't safe, and then immediately after I'd be hospitalized, and then I would go home and everything would be fine again. But the cycle was starting over and over again. And it was something I kind of felt stuck in, like I couldn't get out of the cycle and stop these thoughts that were coming. So what happened in these hospitalizations is that I wasn't really paying attention to the care I was getting. And this was a big barrier because everyone was telling me what treatment to take or what medications to try and all this, and I wasn't really paying attention, and I wasn't a part of my own treatment. For a long time, I said, you know, they're the doctors, they know what's best, so let them do whatever they want to me. And, you know, this mindset was a barrier because I wasn't engaging in what I thought was helpful for myself. So different things happened when I was transitioning from the adolescent care into adult care. It kind of hindered my recovery because when I was an adult, I still did not really engage in my treatment. So as an adult, I was given treatments that at this time now I kind of regret getting. So one of the big things that kind of helped me with these barriers is a switch that I had that really kind of saved my life. So it starts off kind of dark. I had a suicide attempt. It was about 2 years ago, and I winded up in the ER. And what was happening was I wanted to be admitted before this had happened. And I was calling the hospitals over and over again, like, please admit me. I don't feel safe. I think I'm going to do something that I'm going to regret. And they were denying me. They said, you know, you have been in the hospital this many times over the span of the past years. There's nothing more we can do for you. So with being denied the care I thought I needed, I did have a suicide attempt, and it's something that kind of scared me. So the big change for me was that I was scared because I wanted to keep living. And at this point, it was getting kind of bad, and I was starting to worry about staying alive. After my suicide attempt, I was actually denied the hospital immediately after as well. So here I was in the hospital after an attempt, and they still said, you know, go home. There's nothing more we can do for you. So at that point, I really had to hold on to all of the supports around me that were natural and not within an inpatient setting. And this was different for me because as an adolescent, I was constantly inpatient, and that was all I would actually get help from. The only thing that would really, really help me was if I knew I was in a safe place that I couldn't do anything. So this switch really helped me because I used my external support for the first time. During my hospitalizations, I found a youth peer advocate, and that really saved my life. It gave me hope. It gave me something to work towards myself. And, you know, a big part of my hospitalizations was that, you know, I knew the youth peer advocate was there, but going to their groups outside of the hospital is what really, really helped me. I was able to, you know, attend things outside, but still go home every night and still sleep in my own bed and still work on myself afterwards. And after this attempt, I really engaged in my treatment because I wanted to become a youth peer advocate myself. I kind of knew the age constraints, and I knew that, you know, I wanted to do this right now, and I really wanted to be able to tell my story and use my experiences to make change. So utilizing youth peer advocates and things like Youth Power, I also joined Youth Power a couple of years ago, and that was something that really grew my love for advocacy and really kind of started that fire within me to actually work on advocating for others while using my experiences to make it better for other people. So being able to attend groups, I then started volunteering for an agency and then was able to get hired as a youth peer advocate as my first ever job. And, you know, ever since I've been able to become a youth peer advocate, I've really engaged in my treatment, and I use my treatment to model what I need to do for others and what, I want others to be able to realize that you can, survive through your dark thoughts, and you can get through what you're going through. Sometimes we really need to rely on ourselves to, the moment I switched from not caring about what treatment I was getting to, okay, this is what's working and this is what's not, I was able to get the real help I needed because I stepped back and I said, this is what I think helps, not what the doctor thinks helps or not what anyone else thinks helps, is what I think helps. So I just really want to say, when you're trying to engage youth, it's really important to have their own decision in the options. You might think one option is best, but still give them those other options because it's important for them to test out the waters themselves and learn what works best for them. That's kind of all I have to say. You can go from, a youth in the hospital constantly to a youth peer advocate working full time and changing people's lives daily. So, I'm living proof, so you can do it.
Thank you, Alexis. That was so vulnerable and inspirational as I'm reading some of the comments in the chat right now. Your story really highlights, someone being able to, take part in their treatment and have that ongoing care planning as a part of the engagement and that sort of investment from providers and finding that, resiliency in yourself to advocate for that and to also turn to your larger community of support. And you're such a great example of what that looks like, and I'm sure doing such incredible work with the youth that you work with. And so now we're going to turn to Alexis's mom, Narda, to hear a little bit about her experience discovering transition age youth parental support and hope from the caregiver community and what that's like. Go ahead.
Hi. So going into the mental health community was kind of a new place for us, and I was the kind of mom who always thinks, oh, don't worry, I can fix this. We'll figure this out. We'll go to certain people, and I really didn't know what I was doing. And her first hospitalization is when I met a family peer advocate who totally opened my eyes, and I was like, wow, I'm not the only person that has gone through this with a youth. And just by going to those support groups for me, along with her going to her support groups, taught me that different things I could do to support her and to support myself, because it was very hard as a parent to watch her go through everything. The first time she went to the hospital by herself and I was at work was very traumatic for me, but that was her eye-opening experience. Like, sort of in my brain, I was like, maybe I should let her go through this by herself in the ER and see what happens. And actually that made her stronger, even though for me, I had a lot of guilt, but then I realized, no, that's what I needed to do for her to allow her to start experiencing her own treatment of what's going to work for her. That I can't always decide that, because there are so many treatments out there, so many people tell you different things, which is good to get a different perspective, but every person is unique, and I'm glad that she has found her way. All her things I went to with her, like Youth Power, I've got to experience that with her, has been so supportive also for me and gives me the hope that she is the person she is today and helping other people also. So I think the parent support groups are like super awesome.
Great, Narda, thank you so much. And, I think there's so much power in parental or caregiver individual to understand that they're not the only person going through this, and it allows them to be a better support for their youth. And it's so powerful to hear you say, putting the trust and power in your daughter. And for the providers listening, I think this is a great example of how important it is to engage the entire family unit and the entire community, and really make sure you're supporting everyone to make sure that they're understanding what's going on and the different options everyone has to feel really supported as they navigate such a difficult time. And now we're going to pass things to Stephen McCall, and who will share his experience providing parental support as a foster parent.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I apologize. My voice is a little scratchy. I got a little sore throat. But I'm Stephen McCall. I'm a adoptive / foster parent. I've been a foster parent for the past 22 years for, I would say, teenagers and young adults. And with that experience, working with the teens and the young adults, preparing them for adulthood, transitioning to that next phase of their life is difficult. And what I really found out is that it's very frightening for them because, they come into foster care and the foster care agency have to find a placement for them. And then when it's time, they age out of foster care, which you're aging out of the foster care system, but you're not aging out of a family. They still have to find another place for them, whether it's apartment, supportive housing, different things. So for me, it was different because, I've been parenting them for over all of these years. So now it's time to prepare them for adulthood, that transition. So I had to be able to step back and let go because what I realized is that, 21 years old, they wanted to do it on their own. But with me, I'm looking at it that I'm the parent. What I was realizing is that I was basically doing everything for them. And it made it difficult because then they would go to their caseworkers and they wanted to do it on their own. And they kind of, some situations, I'll speak on one where they kind of left me out of it. And the youth, he was so afraid where he started sabotaging getting an apartment, right? So I had to call the caseworkers and I found out what was going on. So I was brought back in the process. So I had to realize I was there just as a support, but not to take over, to let him do everything on his own because he was able to do it on his own, but it was just basically that fear. And, when as a foster parent, with the next phase of transitioning, it's important to have everybody on the same page, the caseworkers, the young adult, the youth, the foster parent, so we could do it together, make it a smooth transition because, even after foster care, you still is in that young adult life forever because families are forever. So it's just having people around who know the different resources, the way to navigate the system because, as a parent, you do it one way and then, you're a foster parent and then you have an agency involved. But it really, really hit me. I'll just share experience where I have a 13-year-old biological daughter. And yesterday she had an interview for high school. And, it was virtual. And she was basically, Daddy, I could do it on my own. I wanted to sit with her to kind of prepare her with questions. And she was like, I could do it on my own. So I was like, do you want me to sit, in the same room when you do it? And she basically said no. And 2 hours later, we got a call back where she got accepted inside. She got accepted in the high school. And it just really dawned on me to say she's 13 years old and want that independence. So imagine a 19, a 20, a 21-year-old. They want that independent too. So, yesterday really opened my eyes up to realize that I have to give them that independence, still be there to support them. But you know what? They could do it. They could do it. And I think Alexis said it best, just allowing the youth to that space, giving them that space. So, that's what I want to share.
Great, thank you. And I think, Stephen, you so thoroughly explained that it's two things that I think are really important that I'll actually get into it in a bit, which is when you transition out of services, there's a lot of mental health needs that need to be met, but also basic needs such as housing and such as just the logistical supports and, not straying away when you're engaging your youth, especially in a provider perspective, to also understand the need of those basic needs and how they're just as important as the more, critical care needs. And then also, such a great example of, being supportive while also stepping back. And so investing in caring and investing in the youth while also letting them kind of have that agency a little bit too. So, I thank you to all the wonderful panelists for sharing their stories. And we'll hear more from them in a few minutes when I give the mic back to them when we talk a little bit about engagement in terms of COVID and answer some questions. I learned a lot from these personal narratives, and I hope everyone in attendance did as well. And at this point, I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what the current literature says about transition-age youth and bring in the personal narratives and how they kind of mapped on here too. And so the purpose of this very brief summary is just to highlight what people in the field are finding as best practice for engagement, all of which were highlighted so well in the personal narratives already. So as you can see on the slide, the first is understanding the youth through the ecological model or as a person in their environment. So as we heard from our panelists, you know, youth don't exist in isolation or from the multiple systems that they interact with. And luckily in the early 2000s, there was a shift from thinking about service utilization from the belief that individuals are making these independent decisions, from understanding that people make choices based on their provider, their caregiver, their family, their peer, etc. And this view is called the ecological view, and it identifies treatment and engagement barriers in particular at multiple levels, from the community to the agency, etc. And we heard about that large community and large ecology from a lot of people we heard from today. And so because of these complex factors interacting with youth, as our panelists kind of really stressed, engagement is not just motivating the young person alone. It's also a combination of engaging their parents and engaging, you know, the variety of different caseworkers and understanding the different influences that they have in their life and the motivation. And if you're really allowing the person you're working with to feel like they're actively in the care planning with you or not. And so we heard a really good example of this is, you know, very distinctly is what Elijah does with Amplify and having the young people and the family and caregivers all being there and having examples of what they could be in the future there as well. So from a provider perspective, I think that's something that the literature says is kind of the utmost important. Secondly is understanding the youth's perception of mental health care, right? So when young people move into the adult mental health care system, they enter with many thoughts and feelings about their treatment and their providers. And Alexis really highlighted this in saying that, you know, she was just, people were making decisions for her, and she had that idea that, okay, the doctors know what's best for me, and that's just how this works, right? And so it's really vital that providers and support networks really take the time to explore youth's past experiences with service systems and their beliefs accordingly about mental health care, and really give attention to what the youth believes about the diagnosis that they have. If they even believe in their diagnosis, what sort of treatment do they want? What do they believe about the different treatments? Are you presenting them with a variety of treatments, as Alexis really stressed? And a lot of this is really culturally informed, so it's really important as a provider also to think about, like, what is the environment that the youth is coming from? What sort of culture are they coming from, and how could that culture influence their view of their mental health and their treatment? And so we heard a lot about this in terms specifically of Alexis's story, and I think what Elijah was sharing a little bit with some of the quotes that we heard from the young people too. Next, moving into the third bullet here, which is providing consistency, especially in the form of consistent relationships. And so all of the stories and all of the things you heard from the panelists really stressed relationships, and whether it was parents finding another parental community, a youth finding a peer advocate, youth attending a large event and finding a ton of youth that had a really similar experience to them, etc. And so, you know, the literature really stresses that from a provider point of view, it's really important to help foster and create that sort of consistency, whether it's very logistically, you know, create that safety and reliability as a provider, consistent meetings, etc. at the same time, but also to help create and cultivate consistent relationships and really look out for if those youth have those relationships in their life. And then finally is meeting basic needs. And this is something that's really interesting that the literature kind of stresses in a lot of different things that I was coming on. And specifically, this is in reaction to a lot of the way that providers approach work with transition age youth and a lot of different interviews with transition age youth. So basically, it's just kind of highlighting that while it's really important to engage with youth to address mental health challenges, it's also really important to address basic needs. So, you know, critical treatment cannot happen without also addressing basic needs. And Stephen really highlighted this about, you know, for a great example of when you're transitioning out of foster care, you need to find housing, and that more the mental health exploration needs to happen alongside someone really helping you find those concrete resources such as housing, right? So put differently, a lot of youth have kind of explained that practitioners often want to jump right into symptom reduction when sometimes what the youth really need is just a really basic need, and they need some help finding that, you know? So I think paying attention to those needs is really, really strong, especially from a provider perspective. And it's a way of really also getting back to the first example. You can only really address those basic needs if you're looking at the person and their whole environment. What is all of which is going on with this youth, right? So yeah, I just wanted to provide that sort of literature perspective, just to kind of supplement some of the stories we're hearing. And now we're actually going to transition into talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how transition age youth and engagement relates to this really stressful and bizarre time that we're experiencing. And we thought it would just be important to just discuss this and address this, and pretty irresponsible to not do so. And so at this point, I would love to ask the panelists to just briefly speak about engaging transition age youth during this time of isolation and telehealth care, and just, if you could talk specifically about what you find critically important at a time like this for engaging youth, and some tips in general. And I think we might have just lost the slideshow. Oh, yes, we are going to take down the slides. Great. So yeah, we'll start with Alexis. So if you could just talk a little bit about anything you find critically important with engaging youth during COVID-19 and any specific tips or anything like that, that'd be great.
Right. So during this time of social distancing with COVID-19, it's definitely a little bit harder on our youth because there's no face-to-face contact right now. Sessions with counseling for me are definitely over the phone, which is a little weird and can be uncomfortable. But what I find is helping a lot is just a lot of reassurance. So, when you make that phone call to a youth, ask them, is now still a good time to talk? Are you in an environment where you feel safe talking? Really making sure that they feel good enough to talk at that time, and just reassuring them that, this will pass, we'll get through this time, and, remember that we're all learning. We're all learning new technology to use, new ways to help engage youth. We really need to explore more options, and maybe this will integrate into a new world of being able to provide support online. I know right now there's tons of online support options going up. I know at Western New York Independent Living we have online support groups. At Mental Health Advocates of Western New York we have support groups, and there's all a bunch. I know Youth Power is also doing some virtual online support, Youth Fest stuff, and so definitely just make sure you're learning constantly. Find new resources, utilize those resources, and help boost our youth into still being engaged, even though it might be a little more difficult. Utilize FaceTime or being able to see each other through a screen. It's not the same as being there, but that little steps like that might help. So really just always talk to the youth and make sure that they feel comfortable in what they're doing. So yeah.
Great. Narda, we'll pass it to you, and then we'll head over to Stephen after this. Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, pretty much we just try to figure out our new normal of staying home a lot now. And I guess for her, I do a lot of reassuring and checking in on her to make sure things are going okay, that she's in a good place. We all need our little alone time. So, we go in different areas of the house, which that seems to help. Yeah, we've been doing like craft night, fun stuff to do together just to get our minds off of stuff, and when she's not working or I'm not at work. So, and just like checking in on her, it's good to check in on anyone during this time to see how their mental health is going. And that's what we kind of do, try to keep little checks on each other and make sure we're all doing okay.
Great. So just to summarize, so far we've heard from Alexis, when you have that contact, to check in to make sure it's actually a good time to talk, and really give that space for you to say, actually, we need to reschedule, because none of us really know what people are going through right now. Also being kind to yourself, that we're all learning. It's such a new mechanism. And then also being flexible and creative, and just, as Narda's saying, really just continuously checking in on people, and then also allowing people to take space, which everyone really needs space. It's such a weird time. Great. And now we're going to pass things over to Stephen. If there's anything you want to add in particular about, tips for engaging youth, transition age youth at this time during COVID, specifically in this isolation period.
Yeah, basically just reassuring them, keeping them busy, not being hard on them, giving them that space, making sure that they keep up with the therapy, the virtual therapy and things like that, and just let them know that we're gonna get through it. We're gonna get through it together. This is tough time, and what's helping for me is just getting their favorite foods in here and keeping a lot of snacks around and stuff like that, and just being there for them, but allowing them to have that space, and to just feel safe and letting them know, because this is like one time when we all home together. Normally I'm at work, they're at school or different programs and stuff like that, but that we all in this together, and I'm here to support you.
Yeah, great. It seems like I'm hearing this theme of being super supportive and knowing people, letting people know that you're unconditionally there, while also letting them know that they can take their space and they can take their time and to not be overbearing at the same time. And it seems like it's a bit of a dance in doing that. So thank you. And Elijah, I'd love to hear from you in particular about, from your work standpoint as well, how that's been going and what that looks like for you, and any additional things maybe specifically from the professional standpoint would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other panelists really explained it well, that this is something that is all of us are going through together. I'm definitely the type of person that likes to try to check in on people as much as I can, whether it's just an encouraging message, to let them know, like, hey, we will get through this together. For myself, who I have my own mental health struggles as well. It's it's different, and it's very sometimes it's a struggle, but just actually recently, just to share, I had a young person from Western New York actually reach out to me, because they too were struggling, and they just needed just a text really quickly, and just being there, just not necessarily trying to offer anything, but just kind of to be there virtually listening in a sense, while they vent. I also had another person that I've known for quite a while, that like they felt like what can I do? Like I'm about to lose my mind, and just offering a bunch of different types of self-care and wellness activities. And they really were able to benefit from that. Even myself, I just went and bought myself a color by number coloring book and some crayons, because it's important that each and every one of us understand that self-care is so incredibly important. And that's something that we also try to do with our wellness session at Amplify New York. And that it's okay that it's difficult. It's difficult for everyone right now, but gotta stay the course, and luckily, with this younger generation, they're very, very much creative with different types of gaming, online gaming, I meant, and doing things virtually and things of that nature, but it's still very different. But yeah, I'm never, that's right, you're never too old to color. I'm sorry, I just saw a comment. Absolutely, we never are. And that was actually something that one of the young people I mentioned used to love to do in the mentoring program that I used to coordinate previously in my role. So self-care is so important, everyone. Make sure that you're taking the time and reach out to someone. It's okay to be struggling during this time.
Great. Thank you. So at this point, we're going to, great, we have a solid 15 minutes. That's awesome. So we're going to transition to Q&A. So Jim is going to feed me some questions, or feed us some questions. Not sure if he's going to feed them to me privately, or he's going to have them all here. But I look forward to getting those. I know we see some in the chat, but I think there are a few more. So Jim, do you want to hop on?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Some wonderful questions. Again, thank you, panelists, for a wonderful presentation. And there are a number of questions. One that I just came in, I think is a really critical one. So, and I'll just read it. Many youth in our area have to change clinics or providers as they age out. This seems to be a roadblock, and they often stop going to therapy altogether. They have built a trusting, safe relationship, and it is hard to start over. Is there any advice on how to support them to find a therapist or to get through the wait time that can be seen in those tough transitions? And I don't know who could speak to Alexis. I don't know if you could speak to that. Okay, great. Please.
All right. So changing therapists has happened to me a million times, probably. So I can definitely speak to the struggles of, the transition from one provider to another, whether it be you're aging out, whether it be something else. It's always just something that I've definitely struggled with. But, again, every time I had a lot of therapists, and every time they did one thing that I didn't like, I would just completely disengage, and I would say, nope, not coming back. I won't see them again. This isn't going to work for me. And that went on for a long time until I found a couple therapists that really changed my life, and I was with them for a solid probably 2 or 3 years. But then what happened then is that, they also said, kind of like the hospital I was talking about earlier said there's nothing more they can do for me. That's what happened with my therapy. And this was when I was also aging out. I was probably 18, I believe, or just turning 18. So I was, again, going to have to transition into adult care. And, what happened is that, my suicide attempt happened during that transition because it was so difficult for me, because I get very attached to people, and changing how things are going really affects me. So things I definitely try and preach to others and tell others is that, keep an open mind. And it's very hard to do that. Even with me, I was so closed-minded. And, I saw a question in the chat, so I'll kind of go along with that. Am I benefiting from online services? As a 16-year-old, if this pandemic was happening and they said, you have to talk on the phone with your therapist, I would have totally denied it and said no, because in my mind, there's no way that was going to help me. But, it's really encouraging young people to try. And, I feel like just having a little boost to say, just give it a try once. I'll support you in trying. Maybe, if it's like an online support group, maybe you attend the first support group with them, or you have a session or talk right before and right after. It's doing these little things that can show that, you're still supporting them, and that, you don't have to give up just because, your therapist is leaving. And, this has happened to me so many times. Just after I went to a new agency probably a year or two ago, and I've had at least 4 therapists at this agency already. And, what I had to learn is that people move on sometimes. People get different jobs, people get new experiences, and, your therapist isn't just saying, bye forever, just go fend for yourself. They also should be a part of bridging that transition to help you find your new person that you can receive help from. And I always talk about, still speak up about if your therapist is a good fit for you. If it's not, we can always go to another one, because we want to make sure that connection is good, and we want to make sure that, you're really benefiting from what services you're getting. That cover it?
Thank you. Elijah, Narda, Stephen, is there anything that you can add, especially with regards to that issue of switching providers and having to stop and start therapy, those kinds of things?
Yeah, this is Stephen. It's very difficult, because what happened is that the youth and the young adult, every time they have to go to a new therapist, they have to start over. They have to go back to that past and revisit it, and a lot of it is just like with caseworkers, because what was really helpful is when my youth, one particular caseworker, and I believe he's listening in, basically you have to connect before you could correct, and it's that connection that they have. And if they have that connection, and the turnover is difficult, but once they have that connection and they feel good with it, they'll continue. But once they age out and they're on their own, in their mind, a lot of them feel, you know what, I don't need it, I don't want to start over. So you have to be there with them. But it's difficult. it's not like I can't give like a solid answer on that because everybody's different. But it's difficult, especially once they leave the system because they want to leave a lot of it behind. Once they transition into that next phase of their life, in their mind, they feel like they don't need it. But if they had probably a peer to say, you know what, it will be helpful. You know, you just have to try different things, but it's not easy.
Stephen, this one just came up, and I have to float this to you. I know we just got you on this one, but this is a tricky one, so I'm going to share it with you and see you get your thoughts. It has to do with foster care. I'll read it. Okay. I work with two youth brothers who live together. The older sibling plans to sign himself out of foster care when he turns 18 in September. These brothers are very close and have always had each other through all the transitions in their lives. The older sibling has been having a lot of difficulty getting along in the foster home. How can I best prepare the younger sibling for the older possibly moving out, and what is the best way to support him when he does move out? I am concerned about how the move away is going to affect the younger sibling.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. The first thing I would do, I would try to talk to the 18-year-old to let them know the difficulties that's out there for an 18-year-old signing themselves out of foster care, out of the system. And I don't know, if there's something going on in the home, because
right.
most I would say youth in foster care, they'll talk 18 years old. I'm signing myself out. I don't want to do it no more. They want out, and a lot of them, they change their mind, but then you'll have some who's adamant about it. Just have to really let the younger brother know that the older brother was still, be in his life and things like that. Make sure they stay connected. Make sure they still communicate. But it's difficult. It's difficult because, like I said, especially if you're not comfortable in your placement, a lot of youth want out of the foster care system. Some of them don't have good experience, and it all depends on that placement, because I have had some who wanted to sign themselves out, but just working as a team, sitting down and explaining, at 18, it's really tough out there. But that's a tough one, especially on the younger brother.
And I want to relate it back to something that was talked about earlier about perceptions and beliefs about the mental health care system. It sounds to me like when you talk about talking to that younger person about their experiences, right, getting their perspective, right, what's driving this, and really getting at kind of what's driving that decision is critically important, as we talked about earlier, right? What's driving your decisions around mental health care? Similarly, what's driving your decision about getting out of foster care? It sounds like that's a really important piece to cover.
I agree. Like I often say, we got to focus more on the trauma that they've been through instead of the behaviors that they displaying. Because with the trauma come the different behaviors, but we focus so much on the behaviors and tend to forget about the trauma.
Okay, so I'm gonna raise another question here, and I think it's kind of been touched on, but it's also that difficulty, and I think you've addressed this. And there's in this question, there's the R word, which I often have a difficult time with, to be honest with you, but I'm going to use it. How would you address TAY youth, transition age youth, being resistant to support or having challenges in accepting treatment, support, or facing the difficulty of working and moving forward while coping with depression, anxiety, and any mental illness? So I realize that's a tough question. And again, resistance I always have a problem with because there's often challenges, but does anybody?
I would just say, for me working with youth and transitioning youth, honestly, what I always remember is, hurt people, rejected people, rejects people, wounded people, wounds people. It's not personal, It's a lot of it is what they've been through, what they're going through, and how they're feeling, right? And just basically being that support and basically having that sense of understanding of where they came from is going to help you and help them get to where they're going, right? And let them be themselves and be there for them. I mean, if they end up in the hospital, just be there for them and let them know that it's not a one-way ticket, because you know what? You may have to go in the hospital, but you still have family. I'm going to be there for you, right? You age out of the foster care system at 21 years old, but you never age out of a family. And some of them, they really, that concept of family is foreign for them, right? So it's going to take time. You know, how do these hurt kids, they don't spell love, L-O-V-E. They spell it T-I-M-E. It's time. So you have to put the time in, and then you'll start seeing changes over the course of time. And, you know, with the stuff that they've been through, you have to be there with them, right? And it's not a quick fix.
Alexis, Narda, Elijah, do you all have anything to add on that?
I do. So I was definitely at times in my recovery and my treatment days, that resistant youth. I was definitely hurt, you know, and I think when I kind of really explore that and think about it, the resistance wasn't coming from like anger or hatred or just not wanting to or being a teen, you know, it was coming from me not feeling heard and me feeling like, you know, if they said something that if a therapist said something I didn't like, you know, it was over for me. And I didn't see that. It was kind of tunnel vision. I didn't see that, you know, people make mistakes sometimes and you have to keep trying these different things before you can find the right treatment. And with that tunnel vision, it was just, you know, it was just a cycle of not being able to see what was really going on that could help me around me. It was like, you know, if this doesn't work for me, we're not trying it anymore. It's over. We're done. And, you know, being able to open my mind up and like see those different options for myself is what really helped me. But again, you know, we're not being resistant just to be resistant. It's because we're not feeling heard or we're not feeling helped enough. So we're kind of just giving up almost, I feel like sometimes. So, you know, really, if that happens, you know, try and talk to your youth and try and explore that and really find what's the root of what's going on, you know, and I think that would have been helpful for me. So.
Great. We're 3 minutes away from time. Is there any, I would love to hear any maybe final closing thoughts from our panelists. We had so many questions come in that I'm seeing on the side, but unfortunately because of time, if any of you would, I know in some webinars, some people offer an email in case someone wants to follow up with you. If you want to offer that, that's welcome. Or if you want to offer more general closing thoughts, that'd be super appreciated, etc. So yeah, anyone want to close us out?
Oh.
Any final thoughts?
Stephen, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Stephen. So I'll just say this in closing. Usually everything usually works out at the end, and if it hasn't worked out, it's probably just not the end. Just keep going, right? Mm-hmm. And tough times don't last, but tough people do. And just with this pandemic and everything we going through, we'll get through it, right? And working with the youth, the transitional youth, you know, Alexis is a prime example. You know, they get through it, and you're doing an excellent job. So, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any final thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, me and my mom were thankful for this opportunity, so we really want to say thank you for having us. You know, we love being able to tell our story and help others. If anyone wants to follow up with me, I know I did see a few questions with my name on them. You can email me at akennedy@wnyil.org, okay? And I will follow up with you guys, and I'm always willing to share my experiences and help in any way I can. So thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Elijah, any last word?
Hey, I don't know. I'm just like honored to be a panelist on this with Stephen, Alexis, and Narda. You guys rocked it out. I saw something come in. Someone sent an email to the Amplify New York email address that I put out there, and it bounced back, I guess. Just send your questions directly to me. efagan@ftmyf.org, or you can go on our website, social media. We're always on Facebook and stuff. You'll be able to reach out to me. This was really great. I really appreciate you all putting this on, and look forward to more of what we're going to do.
Well, you know what, and I just want to say thank you all. Thank you for the panelists. Sophia, thank you for doing a wonderful job moderating the discussion. Yeah. We're going to be posting this webinar on our site. The recording will be available. And also, some questions came in, and I know Youth Power put together a really nice resource on activities and things that you can do to help young people stay connected. Some questions actually came in, Elijah, about websites you can go to stay connected and to stay, to do whatever you need to do to cope with the situation. So we'll try to have links available in addition to this, to the recording and the information that we have, so that you can get access to any of the resources Youth Power has. They've done a really great job trying to figure out ways and providing information to folks about how to help young people deal with this and work through this situation. Again, on behalf of the CTEC, I want to thank you all for being a part of this webinar. We hope you've gotten something out of it. And again, one final thanks to our panelists, Alexis, Narda, Elijah, and Stephen, and our wonderful moderator, Sophia Duarte. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Stay safe.